Most meetings are a complete waste of time.
That's not true. Some meetings need time to be productive.
Welcome to Epic Friday Debate.
It is wonderful to have you with us today. We are looking at a topic that, it generates a lot of frustration in the professional world. We are talking about meetings. It is the inevitable reality of modern business. It really does not matter if you are at a massive global company or, a three-person startup. You likely spend a huge percentage of your life sitting in a chair listening to colleagues talk.
Yeah, exactly. And the central question we are wrestling with today is this. Have we let meeting culture completely destroy our productivity? Should we radically shorten meetings to force efficiency? Or, on the other hand, are we sacrificing quality work and human connection just to save a few minutes on the clock?
Right. It is really a question of culture and values. You have companies that value speed and brutal efficiency above all else. But then you have other organizations that value open discussion, deep analysis, and making sure every single voice is heard before a decision is made.
And that is exactly where we find ourselves today. I am Taylor, and I want to make my position very clear right from the start. I believe the modern workplace is broken. We schedule 1 hour for everything just by default. I believe the vast majority of meetings should be cut in half, 15 or 30 minutes maximum. We really need to stop wasting our lives in conference rooms.
And I am Jordan. I come at it from a very different perspective. I believe that in our modern obsession with speed, we are actually losing the ability to solve real problems. Deep work, complex strategy, and genuine team bonding, those things just cannot be done in a 15-minute sprint. If we rush every interaction, we make mistakes. And those mistakes cost us much more time in the long run.
Well, I am totally ready to challenge that. I honestly think that wanting depth is often just an excuse for a lack of preparation. Shall we get into it?
Let's do it. I am ready.
Great. So I want to start with a concept that I think explains why long meetings are so damaging to actual work. It is the difference between a manager's schedule and a maker's schedule.
Ah, right. That is a pretty classic distinction in the tech world.
Exactly. So a manager views the day in hourly blocks. They move from a sales meeting to a hiring meeting to a budget meeting. If they have a meeting from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, they just find a new slot for the next thing. It is just another block on the calendar for them.
Yes, because that is simply how their day is structured. Their job is to communicate.
But a maker, someone who actually writes code, designs graphics, writes reports, or does deep analysis, they need long, uninterrupted stretches of time to focus. When you force a 1-hour meeting into the middle of their afternoon, you do not just lose that 1 hour. You completely destroy their focus for the whole afternoon. They cannot easily get back into that deep mental state.
I see why you think that. If you view work strictly as the output produced while sitting completely alone at a computer, then yes, a meeting looks like an interruption. But I would strongly argue that communication is the work. You cannot build a great product in total isolation.
Is it, though? Or is it just talking about the work instead of doing it?
In my experience, work expands to fill the time available. This is known as Parkinson's Law.
Maybe you should explain that briefly for our listeners.
Sure. Parkinson's Law basically states that if you give a task 2 hours, it will take exactly 2 hours. If we schedule 60 minutes to discuss a project, we will talk for 60 minutes. We will fill the air with repetition, personal stories, and small talk. But if we schedule 15 minutes, everyone comes in focused. They get straight to the point. It saves so much time. Well, I think that is a very optimistic view of human nature. You assume that if you just cut the time, people will magically become more efficient. In my experience, if you cut the time, people just become more confused.
How so? Why would they be confused if the point is clear?
Because real understanding takes time. You mentioned repetition earlier, and you framed it as a bad thing. But I've noticed that repetition is often completely necessary for a team to agree. If I tell you a complex strategy once, very quickly, in a 15-minute rush, you might nod your head. You might say yes. But did you really understand the nuance? Did you fully understand the risks involved?
But we can read. This is my biggest frustration. Why are we reading documents out loud to each other in a conference room? That can simply be an email. If people actually prepared beforehand, we would not need the repetition. It encourages preparation when the meeting is short.
Okay, reading a document out loud is a waste of time. I agree with you there. That is just bad meeting habits. But discussing the results of that document requires a real dialogue. You cannot solve a multi-layered business problem in a 15-minute rush. I've been in meetings where we tried to rush a decision just to stay efficient. We approved a plan in 20 minutes.
Right, and what happened? You made a decision, which is good.
No, it was bad. We missed a critical technical detail because we were watching the clock. That false efficiency cost us 3 weeks of extra work later on. Rushing leads to shallow thinking. It leads to what looks like speed, but it is actually just sloppy work.
I would push back on that. I argue that shallow thinking comes from a lack of preparation, not a lack of meeting time. If everyone had read the information before the meeting, you could have spotted that technical error in 10 minutes. The problem is not the clock. The problem is that we use meetings as a crutch because we are too lazy to write things down clearly.
That is a pretty harsh assessment, though I will admit there is some truth to it. But let's talk about the human element, which you are ignoring. You are totally focused on data transfer. I am focused on team dynamics. Creativity, for example, is not a light switch.
Go on. How does a long meeting make people more creative?
Well, you cannot just walk into a room and say, okay, everyone, be brilliant for 12 minutes, go. Creative ideas need time to develop. They need a relaxed atmosphere. Good brainstorming requires a bit of wandering, a bit of silence, and the freedom to explore bad ideas before you find the good ones. A ticking clock absolutely kills creativity because it creates anxiety.
See, I think constraints actually breed creativity. When you have less time, you stop overthinking. But I see we are moving into specific work situations here, so I want to test this theory of yours against the reality of the calendar. Let's move to the challenge round.
I am ready for the challenge round. Context is everything.
Let's look at the absolute most common offender in the corporate world. The weekly team meeting. Monday morning, 10 people in a room. We go around the table and everyone says what they did last week.
Yes, the classic status update meeting.
Precisely. I argue this meeting is a dinosaur. It is just a habit, not a necessity. By the time the fifth person is speaking, the first person is checking their email under the table. This meeting should be 15 minutes maximum, purely for major announcements. The individual updates should be written down and read asynchronously, meaning on our own time.
I disagree strongly here, and I think you are completely missing the psychological purpose of that specific meeting.
Which is what? Wasting my Monday morning?
No, the purpose is social cohesion. In a modern workplace, especially with remote work, you might not speak to your colleagues for days at a time. That 1 hour is essential for preventing isolation. It reminds everyone that they are part of a larger mission. When I hear what you are working on, even if it doesn't directly affect my task today, it helps me understand the company's direction. It builds trust. If you turn that into a written list, you turn the team into just a group of robots.
But does team morale really come from sitting in a boring meeting? I would argue that morale comes from winning. Morale comes from getting your work done well and going home on time to see your family. I do not need a meeting to feel connected. I just need clear goals.
But you're assuming the meeting is inherently boring. If it is boring, that is the fault of a bad manager, not a bad format. A good leader makes that time valuable for everyone. But let's look at your second scenario. You brought up creativity a moment ago.
Yes, the brainstorming session. The worst offender of them all.
You really think brainstorming can be done in 15 minutes?
I think the traditional 2-hour brainstorming session is actively counterproductive. The energy always drops after 40 minutes. People just start repeating themselves because they are tired. I believe in asynchronous ideation.
Could you define that term for our B1 and B2 listeners?
Sure thing. Asynchronous just means we do not have to be doing the same thing at the exact same time. So you give people the problem on Monday. They think about it alone. maybe while walking the dog or taking a shower. They write down their best ideas. Then, on Tuesday, you meet for 30 minutes just to select the best ones. You do not need to generate the ideas while sitting in the room.
I'm not sure I agree with that method. That misses the magic of collision.
Collision? What do you mean by that?
Yes, collision. The magic happens when I say something half-finished, and it triggers a new thought in your head, and you add to it, and then a third person sees a connection we both missed. That chain reaction, that intellectual jazz, requires a live, relaxed, open environment. You cannot replicate that simply by reading a list of ideas on a screen. You need the energy of the room.
I will concede that intellectual jazz sounds very nice in theory, but in practice, it is usually just the loudest person in the room dominating the conversation. Short meetings democratize the process because you force people to take turns and be quick. But let's raise the stakes to something more serious.
Okay, let's hear the next scenario.
Crisis management. The server is down. A major client is threatening to leave. The building is metaphorically on fire.
Right, a very high-pressure situation.
In a crisis, I argue for a military style. Short, sharp, direct communication. What is the problem? What is the fix? Go. You do not need a debate. Long meetings in a crisis are dangerous because they delay the solution.
I understand that instinct. When the fire alarm is ringing, you just want to run. But I think that approach is highly risky.
Risky? Taking action is risky?
Uninformed action is risky. When you are in a crisis, the urge is to apply a quick bandage immediately. But if you do not take the time, even just an hour, to fully understand the root cause of the problem, you might apply a fix that actually breaks the system further. I would argue that in a crisis, you need a period of intense, uninterrupted discussion to ensure you are solving the right problem.
So while the building burns, you want to sit down and have a philosophical seminar about the nature of fire?
No, I want to make sure we do not throw gasoline on the fire because we mistakenly thought it was water.
We might just have to agree to disagree on that one. I strongly prefer action. You prefer analysis. But there is one final factor we haven't touched on yet which changes all of this. The medium. Online meetings versus in-person meetings.
Ah, yes. This is the huge defining factor of our modern work time.
It really is. And I think online meetings specifically, like Zoom or Teams, absolutely need to be shorter. Zoom fatigue is a biologically real thing. Staring at a grid of faces on a screen is cognitively exhausting. You simply cannot hold someone's attention for an hour on a video call the way you can in a physical room.
That depends on the situation. I do agree that video calls are physically tiring. However, consider what we lose when we move online. We lack body language. We lack those subtle physical cues, a shifted glance, a nervous tap of a pen, someone leaning forward to speak.
That is a very fair point. We do lose those signals.
Because we lack those visual cues, we actually need more time to ensure clarity online. In person, I can easily see if you are confused just by looking at your face. Online, I might miss that completely due to a bad camera angle or a small screen. So we need to take extra time to verbally check in, to ask, does that make sense repeatedly? If we rush an online meeting, the risk of miscommunication is incredibly high because the quality of our communication is lower.
That is a compelling argument. I admit, looking at a plastic camera lens is not the same as looking someone in the eye. If we rush online, we might think we agree when we actually do not.
Exactly. And fixing that misunderstanding takes days of extra work.
Well, we have covered a lot of ground here today, from the psychology of the maker's schedule to the mechanics of Zoom fatigue. And I suspect our listeners have very strong feelings about this. Everyone has a meeting horror story.
Absolutely, everyone. And we want to hear from you. We are turning the attention to you, the listener, right now.
We have a direct question for you to answer in the comments. It is very simple. Should meetings be shorter? Comment yes or no.
But we also want the context. What is the longest, most painful meeting you have ever had? Was it productive in the end, or was it a total nightmare?
I once had a 4-hour meeting about choosing a font color for a company holiday card.
Oh, wow. That sounds incredibly painful.
It was soul-crushing. I honestly think a part of me died in that conference room that day. So please, tell us your stories. And here is a challenge for you. Try to use one of the polite disagreement phrases you heard in this episode when you write your comment.
Yes, phrases like, I see your point, but, or I come at it from a different way. It is great practice for your professional English.
And we promise we will read and reply to your comments. We want to see this debate continue down in the chat.
Now, before we wrap up, I think it is useful to do a little meta-analysis. We want to reflect briefly on the language we use today to manage this disagreement.
That is right. You might have noticed that even though we disagreed on almost every single point today, the conversation never became hostile. We never said, you are wrong, or that is a stupid idea.
Right. We use what is called softening. In a professional context, when you want to attack an idea, you have to be very careful not to attack the person.
For example, instead of saying, no, that's not true, I use the phrase, I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning. It separates the logic from the person speaking.
And I use the phrase, I see why you think that, but. This is a very powerful tool for the workplace. It validates the other person's perspective. It says, I am listening to you, I understand you, before you introduce your counterargument.
These phrases are so essential. If you just say, I disagree, it stops the conversation completely. If you say, I see your point, but have you considered, it invites collaboration instead of conflict.
Exactly. It keeps the door open. It turns a fight into a productive discussion.
So bringing it all back to our central question today, should meetings be shorter?
I think we have seen that it is not a simple binary choice. It is really about matching the time to the task at hand.
I still maintain that efficiency must be the priority. We waste too much life in these rooms. By keeping things short, we force focus. We respect people's time.
And I still maintain that we are in danger of optimizing the human element right out of our work. We need space to think, to connect, and to solve complex problems together. You cannot automate human relationships.
Perhaps the real answer lies somewhere in the middle. Maybe we need ruthless efficiency for information sharing and generous time for creation and bonding.
I could definitely agree with that. Information should be fast. Wisdom takes time.
Well, we are not going to declare a winner today. That is up to you, the listener, to decide.
We really hope you enjoyed this exploration of workplace culture.
As we mentioned, please do leave your comments. Also, check the description below. We have prepared a debate handout that lists the vocabulary and the disagreement phrases we used today. It is a great resource for reviewing what you learned.
And we will be back next week with another topic.
So, invite your colleagues to listen. Maybe even schedule a meeting to watch it together.
Or maybe just send them the link to save time.
Touché. Thank you for listening to Epic Friday Debate. We will see you next time.
Goodbye, everyone.